My name is Dr. Temi Odumosu. I was born and raised in London from two amazing Nigerian parents. I would describe myself as an art historian and a creative educator. An art historian for me encapsulates all of the things that I love: writing, teaching, drilling archives, interrogating history, telling stories. A creative educator because I am passionate about sharing knowledge with people and helping them to see things in new ways. For the last 10 years or so, my research has been focused on the visual representation of people of African descent in popular visual culture, primarily produced in Europe, but also in America and to a lesser extent in the West Indies. I'm really an 18th century scholar. I've spent most of my time looking at images produced during that period at the height of the transatlantic slave trade, where this issue of colonization, this new foreign influence became a hot topic and was therefore represented in the kind of images that people made. My PhD at the University of Cambridge explored the representation of Black characters in political and social humor and looked at the ways in which they became symbolic of all of these external influences working their way through British society at the time. The main themes I really interrogate in my research are things to do with race, identity, and representation. So I'm interested in the way, firstly, people of African descent and other ethnic minority communities have been represented in the West as a sort of other, a foreign presence. But then I'm interested in the ways in which stereotypes are created around their presences and then replicated and reproduced over time. The things that I have noticed through my journey in the archive are that actually, for the most part, the images that we consumed early in the 18th century haven't changed in the present day. This idea of Black people's bodies being a stage upon which desires and fantasies are projected, ideas of the savage and the exotic, and bodies connected to things that are about pleasure and luxury and excess, those things are still the same, they haven't changed. So for me, I've been fascinated about the way in which we live with a very strong visual memory that has come from the past, and that just doesn't seem to have adapted with time. Another really interesting thing that has stood out to me during my process of interrogating the archive is just how much there's hidden there. There's so many stories that are yet to be told, and for me, I'm fascinated by this process of actually going into an archive and taking out new things, and what that means to me as a researcher, but also to the development of knowledge itself. And so while I'm interested in the archive in its own right, I'm also fascinated with what happens to researchers in that process, and also the kinds of researchers that go into archives and how that shifts and changes the way stories are told. So the other thing I am really passionate about is also changing the ways in which knowledge is constructed. For me, academia is filled with people telling stories from actually a very limited point of view. So I'm interested in expanding that view, bringing in different diverse voices, thinkers, educators, artists, people who see the world in a different kind of way, and trying to just mix up that view of academia or the ivory tower as being one perspective, which is predominantly European and predominantly male. And I think as my own presence in this space of academia, and also these alternative presences that I invite in, as we begin to have a dialogue here, we can help to change and transform the discourse. I have worked with an amazing body of knowledge, some of which is represented in part here through books and artifacts and films and archives that explore the representation of people of African descent, and that also look at the way in which Black aesthetics can be transformed and changed. And so for me here at Living Archives, I think I have two roles. One, just to bring different kinds of archives into conversation with the kinds of technology and theories that our group is developing. And then also to think about the ways in which we can bring these images and these presences into public space. How can we use this knowledge and this data that is so prevalent in my archive, bring it in conversation with the archives of people out there who perhaps don't know it very well, or perhaps haven't come into contact with these kinds of images. So providing an alternative perspective, another point of view, another way of thinking about representation, that's my goal here at Living Archives.